everyone. I'm Mike Cannici, and welcome to another edition of Valley Sports Rewind. And today we're going to have on a very interesting guest. He's also my cousin, and we both grew up. He grew up in Ansonia, and of course I grew up in Derby, and we're here with Sean Morse. And Sean, thank you for coming on today, man.
Thanks for having me, Mike. I really appreciate it.
You know, Sean, you know the history of how we grew up. I grew up in Derby, grew up in Ansonia, and it was pretty interesting. Our families kind of had a lot of arguments on Christmas Eve, you know, Thanksgiving, things of that nature. When did you kind of first get introduced, though, to, like, Ansonia sports?
Believe it or not, it was Ansonia soccer. It was with the Strikers.
Wow. Yeah.
And it was at the Ansonia Nature Center. It was for the Strikers. Yep.
Wow. Now, football's always been the big thing, especially in the Valley, but with our families, you know, our Uncle Ed grew up with it. My father, Tony, grew up with it, with Derby. Did you ever feel a pressure to put on the pads knowing that, like, our family was big into that?
Yeah, definitely. I think it started, you know, with our Uncle Ed Morse, who's well known here in the Valley. You know, he was assistant to the mayor to Red Adante back in the 80s. But really, a lot of it came from my brother, Chris Morse, you know, and that's really where he really pressured me a lot to play.
Right. And Chris was actually a former player. I believe he played on the 84 and 85 Ansonia teams, if I'm not mistaken.
Yes.
Yeah. You know, it was big back then, too. I mean, the rivalry was really big. That's when I kind of started to get to notice it more. I think, you know, I was maybe like 10 years old, and it really started to pick up. And, you know, Chris was very intense with that rivalry as well.
Definitely. And he definitely influenced me to play football quite a bit.
Right. Now, you grew up in Ansonia, obviously. One of the biggest things to come out of the town of Ansonia was the legendary KO Club, and it was run by a guy by the name of Bubba Greene. And just talk about the KO Club a little bit and what that experience was like.
Yeah, Willis Bubba Greene up on Hull Street, which is not too far from Nolan Field. You know, the KO Club was a place where things were taught to you that the coaches couldn't teach. Bub taught you things, integrity, respect, you know, things that the coaches taught, but he taught you life lessons in a different way. It's also a place where all the trophies were. A lot of the trophies were that weren't at the high school. The film room was there. There was a ping pong table, a pool, you know, and there was a weight room as well. A lot of guys went to the YMCA, but, you know, there was also a special weight room there mainly for football players.
Right. And if I'm not mistaken, a lot of the film the coaches would break down, they wouldn't go to the high school or the clubhouse. They would go to the KO Club to do all that, correct?
Right. There was no spot for them at the high school. You know, at the high school they had sort of a projector over the auditorium, but that was really never used because that was used for more. It was kind of run down, you know, when I was in high school in the 90s, but I think previous years it might have been used. But, yeah, the KO Club is where films went, as far as I knew, going back as far as the 70s or 60s, even when things were on reel-to-reel.
Right. Now, let me ask you, did you have to be, like, in junior high school? Did you have to be in high school? When could you become a member of the KO Club?
You had to be in ninth grade, so a freshman in high school.
So it was basically a high school type of club, more or less. And kids, I believe, would go there after football practice a lot, after basketball practice, correct? I mean, it was definitely a popular place to be, especially on the weekends and things of that nature.
Yeah, and people would go there in the off season, not just to work out, but just to hang out and watch basketball games or, you know, baseball games. There was also a handful of people who weren't football players that would go to that club as well.
Right. Now, you had said Bub taught you a lot of life lessons. How much would you say, as a high school kid, how much would you say he influenced your life? I mean, he may not have always told you what you wanted to hear, as you mentioned, but did you learn a lot from him?
Tremendously, yeah. A tremendous amount of character was built from not only the football program, but especially from Bub. Like I said earlier, Bub was able to teach you things that the coaches weren't able. They weren't in a position able to teach you because they were your coach, and they had to report you to your parents quite a bit. Bub dealt with the parents once in a while when your parents would call there looking for you, but he was able to teach you things that, you know, you just weren't able to teach, you know, as a coach.
And, you know, the other thing about Bub, too, I mean, and we're going to get into the whole classic page later, but a lot of those games that are being shown right now online on the Ansonia Derby Classic page was from Bub, spending every Saturday taping those games. And, back then you only had a reel to reel. So, I mean, the work he did behind the scenes was amazing.
Definitely. Bub taped those games for something like 50 or 60 years,
Right.
I mentioned reel to reel before, and he did quite a bit with that. He had some people helping him from time to time. I know when I was in high school, Jeff Toller was a particular person that was at pretty much almost every game helping Bub, move cable and stuff, and get the right spot in the press box and things like that.
The crazy thing is, I mean, I don't know. Was he born and raised in Ansonia, or did he come to Ansonia later in life? But I mean, he really was a fixture in the town of Ansonia.
I believe Bub was from Georgia originally. I think he might have gone to Howard University, if I'm not mistaken. He was a veteran for a while as well, if I'm not mistaken, too. So I think he came to Ansonia, I'm not really sure when, but probably in the 40s, something like that.
Right.
And, he opened that club when my parents were in high school, which was like in they remember him as long as that.
Wow.
It's going back to the 50s. And, they told me even before that, that club was open. So I think he died in 2008?
Somewhere around there, maybe 2009, but somewhere, yeah.
So figure at least from the 50s to the 60-something years.
Right.
And he was in close to late 80s, I think, when he died.
And I believe one of the things they did before he died is they named the press box after him at Jarvis Field in Ansonia, which used to be the old Nolan Field, if I'm not mistaken, correct?
Correct.
Yeah. Now, let me ask you, there's a lot of popular figures in Ansonia over the years. You can make the argument Pop Shortle, Charles Boots Jarvis, Billy McAllister, but you, from a guy who grew up in Ansonia and saw Bubba Greene all the time, where would you put him as, where would you rank him as far as the most famous people in Ansonia?
I don't know if you want to really get into rankings and things like that. I don't think I'm in a position to be, ranking who's better than who or anything like that. I think if you talk to anyone around the valley, they would, or Ansonia in particular, they would tell you what a great person Bubba Greene was. And he was a father to many, but never had never was a father himself.
Right. And the thing is, what people sometimes forget as well is he probably didn't make a lot of money running that club, but he gave kids in high school a place to go where they could hang out. You have a long day of practicing 3 hours, and you're tired. You want to go somewhere where you could just kind of relax and chill out, and I think that place gave those kids that outlet.
It did. It was a unique place for people to. I've never heard of any place like it, really. I really never heard of any place like it in the country, or anywhere where someone would just devote their entire life, buy a second house, and devote their lives to children. It's a very risky thing to do to begin with, and for Bub to put himself out there like that is quite unselfish, and it's remarkable.
Right. Now, let me ask you, I mean, obviously when he died, the club died with him. I'm pretty sure the last few years of his life he wasn't able to maintain it as well because, he's going through health issues. But did you ever think that that club would no longer be in existence, or did you think it would always be there for a long time to come?
I think it exists in the lessons that he taught people,
Right.
I think the character that he built in the kids that played for that program or that, went up to the club, I think it lives on in that way, Right.
Now, one of the things, too, I was going to ask you, do you have any, I heard he was quite the character. Any good Bubba Greene stories that you could share? I mean, I know there's some you probably can't, but there's got to be some good ones as well.
There's quite a few I just cannot mention because they're just not meant to be aired. But I'll tell you one. So one day I was up the club, and Bub had a big, lazy boy chair that he used to sit in. And he was away from his chair for a minute. I don't know if he was in the bathroom or something. And the phone rang, so I answered the phone. And I said, KO Club. And he said, the caller said, can I speak to Willis, please? And, most people called him Bub. If they called him Willis, they knew him pretty well. So I said, may I ask who's calling? And he said, it's Charles Jarvis. And I had to take a minute. I had to take a second and take a step back for a second. And I was like, oh, my God, it's Butch Jarvis on the phone.
Yeah.
And if you remember, if you've ever watched the Alabama versus Auburn documentary, it's a 30 and 30 on ESPN. It's called Roll Tide, War Eagle.
Right.
Bo Jackson talks about when Bear Bryant was recruited, when he was recruited by Bear Bryant. And Bear Bryant called his house. And people would come to his house afterwards and say, that's the phone that Bear Bryant called on.
Right.
So that's what the experience of Boots Jarvis calling the KO Club and asking to speak to Bub when I answered the phone was like for me.
Yeah, Boots, if people aren't familiar, which I'm sure they are if they followed Valley football, Valley sports in general, he at one time coached 4 sports at Ansonia High School. I believe he was the football coach, the basketball coach, the baseball coach, as well as the track coach. And Boots, did that for many, many years. And I mean, he definitely laid out the groundwork for Ansonia sports.
Yeah, and him and Bub and Boots were good friends. They talked quite a bit.
Right. It's remarkable the impact that Bub had. And I mean, to this day, anybody that went to that club always has a special place in their heart for him as well.
Definitely. He's I remember when I was going away to college in Florida, I was getting ready to leave the Valley for a couple years, and I said, one thing I got to do is I got to go see Bub. And I went up there, I brought him a card and stuff, and I said, Bub, I always appreciated, this is, well after I was out of high school, and I said, I really always appreciated everything you did for me, and I want you to know that. And that was the last time I ever saw him. That was about 2000. Actually, that was 1998, 99, I think it was, 99.
Right, and he had, I think, started going through some health issues. But you know what? One thing people would always say, they'd say it over and over, is he never asked you to feel sorry for him, and he never complained about any discomfort. He wasn't that type of guy to complain.
No, and he didn't like media attention either. I kind of wonder how he would feel about me talking about him here. He'd probably be wondering what the hell's the matter with you. But he was a very humble human being, and he also had the best cooking I've ever had in my entire life. I've been to 27 states and 5 European countries, and I've never had better chicken or deer meat than I had from Bubba Greene.
Wow. Wow, that's pretty unbelievable.
Yeah, the deer meat, it was the first time I had venison. I was like 16 years old, and he said, do you want some deer meat? And I brought some deer meat in. He brought some deer meat in. He had a fryer up there like you would see in like a restaurant.
Right.
And he breaded the deer meat, and it was just phenomenal. And anyone who had Bubba Greene's cooking will tell you the same thing.
Wow, that's pretty amazing.
Yeah.
Now, I want to say you were probably maybe 12, 13 years old when you first decided to go out for football. I believe you played Pop Warner, maybe 7th or 8th grade. Was it something your father talked you into, your brother, or was it something you wanted to do?
Yeah, I was in 7th grade, so I think I was about 13. It was something, it's just what you did in those days, you know. When you grew up in the Valley, that was the thing to do,
Now, was there a part of you that went out for it because of the history of Ansonia and their great tradition, or did you just get the urge to play? Because sometimes people do go out for stuff because, they feel, like you said, it was the thing to do. It was like you watch that Varsity Blues movie and, these parents made it a point to their kids that they have to, be a Coyote. What was your feeling? Was it your decision alone?
Everybody's influenced by the town in some way.
Right.
I think ultimately I was the one that decided to sign up.
Right.
Sure, my brother influenced me, and our uncle and my father and everything. But I definitely wanted to play. That was I think 1985. I started to like the Chicago Bears at that time.
Right. And you were big into the Bears when at that age, kids really didn't, they watched the NFL to a point, but they couldn't stay glued to it, and you were really glued to the Bears. I remember that a lot.
And Walter Payton, and I just started to love football in general.
Right.
And then growing up in this town, how could you not like football?
Right. So now it's your first year playing Pop Warner. I believe you played for the Ansonia Coppers. I think you played for the not Sastries, the Phipps and
No, the Phipps were junior midgets. I played for the Seadors, and the midgets,
right.
and Marcello Boano.
Right. And you know what I think too? We'll get into your football career a little bit, but I think that the biggest reason Ansonia football has been so successful for probably the last 50 years is I think it always started in Pop Warner, and I think those guys did a tremendous job of introducing these kids to football and getting them prepared for high school football.
Yeah, I mean, you can't have a high school football program without some of the phenomenal people. I know you mentioned the Phippses and
right,
and I mentioned the Cedars, but there was quite a few people at that level that prepared them for that, and that's why they had championship caliber teams at the high school level.
Right. So now you play that first year at Pop Warner. You're a young kid, so you're not thinking about down the road. I mean, you are to a point, but what did you take out of that first year? Did you enjoy it? Like, did you like being on the field? Or, I mean, what was your take on that first year of doing it?
I just learned a lot from one of the Sharkies. I can't remember which one.
I think maybe Dennis.
Dennis
right.
Sharkey, yeah. I learned a lot from him. He really rode me pretty good about how to be a lineman.
Right.
And how to get in a proper stance and how to come off the ball and things like that. Basics, fundamentals of football. And so that's where I learned the basics. I actually played a little bit behind Tom Foley, who ended up being our cousin later in life.
Right.
And I played a lot of defensive line too.
Right. And you enjoyed it though? I mean, you were into it a lot.
Definitely, yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Now, one of the things we talked about is our families and stuff like that. And, myself and you, we would always have a yearly bet back then. If Ansonia beat Derby, I would have to show up at Christmas Eve and wear an Ansonia jacket or an Ansonia shirt with a hat. And I remember one year you guys set me up because I had made the bet with Uncle Ed, and you took it upon yourself to bring this flag, this jacket, this whole thing set me up. And I just remember being so miserable at that time. But, looking back at it, I mean, it's things like that you really enjoy about your childhood, is doing things of that nature.
Yeah, it was a time when the rivalry was in a different status.
It was big. Yeah.
Division Street meant the two teams were divided.
Right.
And in our case, me and you, that meant that we were cousins and we were tight in that way. But when we
hated each other that week of the game, though, it would be talk. Oh, we're gonna kill you. No, you're gonna kill us. I mean, it was definitely intense for a time.
Yeah, and as far as that flag goes, that flag was a lavender flag, and it was. We're talking like 1989.
89.
Okay.
Yeah.
So 89. So that was the year Kennebrew and them played Weston.
Yes, in the snow. Yeah.
In the snow. So. That flag was a lavender flag, and my mother was a guidance counselor at the high school.
Right.
And she brought the flag home one day to show me, and I took it upon you to enter it into the rivalry.
Yeah, of course. So you know what I had to do? Fast forward to a year later, 1990, Derby wins the state championship. They beat Ansonia. I just made this flag out of like some sheet and stuff like that, and I put the score on there, Derby 19, Ansonia 15, set you guys up, because I said, you know what, these guys got me on Christmas Eve. Guess what? I went through a whole year of that, had to see those pictures. I said, I'm going to get payback, and, I think that's what was fun about it, is it was never like personal. We never got mad at each other. We might get mad in the moment, but you got over it pretty quick.
Yeah, and it was, so that was 1990, right, that year?
That Derby
it was
one.
With Joe Martin in them?
Yeah, good team, yeah. And Ansonia had a great team, with Kevin Sharkey and Dennis Tinney, or was it? Yeah, Dennis Tinney, Carl Barrett. So it was a great time. It was definitely a great time to grow up in the Valley back then, because there were no iPads, no cell phones, no internet. What you had was Valley football, Valley sports in general, and I think that was, to me, I know these kids have so much more now, but I always think, and maybe it's because I grew up in that era, but I just always think it was a better time back then.
Well, I think it was also a time when kids went outside and played in the dirt, even if they didn't have sports, and
right,
you just don't get that today. Yeah.
No. So, So now, we were talking about our friendly bet and stuff. So we both play our freshman year. You play for Ansonia, I play for Derby. And in the summer, we had already agreed to make a bet. Whoever won that freshman game would have to, again, show up on Christmas Eve. But you know what I remember, too, about that is it kind of brought us closer, and it kind of also made us realize that, you know what, going through practice every day, 3 hours a day getting yelled at, stuff like that, and having to sacrifice so much that the game was important, but there were more important things to us. And, as time went on, we realized that this is just, nothing that we should, make life or death. And I think we had fun with it that year as well.
Yeah, I think it's the values you take from it.
Right.
What values are you going to take from such things? Are you going to take the lessons of character building, teamwork,
Right.
Things like that. Things that you learn, things that often get overlooked in sports today, were there back then. And I'm starting to sound like an old man, but,
I know, unfortunately, we're getting old, but you know what I remember? So that game happens. Ansonia beats us 26-0. We get killed. It was only 6-0 at the half, but I just remember walking out of that game and we're shaking hands and stuff. And then we go to the game that weekend to watch the varsity play. We had a lot of fun with it. Even though I was on the losing end, you were on the winning end, like I said, I think it bonded us too, because, you were there, I was there, and we had to go through a lot. It was a lot of commitment that, if nothing else, we just had fun with it. And at the end of the day, we really weren't rivals at all.
No, I think, it was, again, character building. It's
Right.
And if we had just gone to school and just went and did our schoolwork and then went home,
Right.
were we going to go home and talk about the history of Julius Caesar?
Yeah. We used to have many phone call conversations too, telling a funny story or something like
Right.
that. And, stuff the coaches would say. And that's the thing too. We got to know the other town because we talked to each other. I knew so much about John Sponheimer, and I'd never seen what he looked like. And I would always try to, picture him and vision what he was like because of always hearing about him. And, I tell you about a guy that was one of our coaches, Chris Ruther, and we'd always talk about him. And you would always say, oh, was Ruther blowing the whistle in your face again and stuff like that. And we got to know I knew all the players from Ansonia because of you, and you knew all the Derby players because of me. And that's what I took out of it. That was the most fun about, us getting into it as far as that went.
Yeah, I mean, I think we both took some flack for that too.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, you're giving this one plays or
Yeah.
why I remember one night, I'll tell a funny story real quick. You came, Ansonia had a night off. They played on a Saturday. So Derby was playing East Haven, I believe. And you came to the Derby game to hang out with me. And I think it was my friend Bill Giles. And we're hanging out. And you're walking by and you're asking him, hey, who's your right guard? And you see Spoony there. You didn't realize he was there. And you go like this. You go, who's your right guard? And you see him and you go, for basketball. You were so worried that he was going to get mad at you for talking to a Derby player that you tried to change the story, which was funny. But I mean, those are the things that were fun about it. I'll tell you what, going to see Ansonia play sometimes that year, and I'm sure you going to see Derby and just hanging out and stuff, it was a lot of fun that freshman year. Even going to basketball games too, it was a lot of fun.
It was a lot of fun. That's that's sort of the year when you're figuring things out.
Right.
Yeah, our team kind of had it figured out already, but
Right.
we were still figuring different things out. But you and I, we were figuring a lot of things out about growing up.
Yeah, it was definitely, a learning experience. And I mean, it got to the point too where, we would call each other after playing each other and we didn't even give each other a hard time. We just talked about the game. I remember one time you called me after I think we had beat Ansonia in a JV game. And you were just like, oh, my God, Tim Wandell, he was killing me today. I was having such a rough game with him. It was things like that. We went from, killing each other, oh, we're better than you, this and that, to just, talking about what went down in the game. And, there just became a mutual respect right there.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's what brought us closer together as friends in high school,
Right. And, that's really what it's about is if nothing else, if you develop the friendships from that game, then it's all worth it in the end to have done it. And I know it definitely was for us.
It was, yeah, it definitely was. And, how you sportsmanship,
Right.
which is another thing that's overlooked today. It taught us sportsmanship, and I think I had that with you. We had a lot of off-the-field sportsmanship.
Right. I know we're kind of going back a little bit, but I know when you were like in 7th and 8th grade, one of the things that was very popular was Ansonia's, I want to say their Biddy Basketball League or whatever you called it, and you were on it. They didn't give you in Derby, they always give you team names like the Celtics, the Knicks, the Nets, whatever. In Ansonia, they gave you like these unusual names, and you played on a team with Lenny Slevin. How do you say it?
Savelnis,
yeah. You played on a team with him called the Magicians. You played for a guy, Sam Smith, very good basketball player for Emmett O'Brien. But I remember you talking about that a lot, seeing that in the paper. That was another fun time about growing up in the Valley in general.
Yeah, I played on the Charter Hose basketball team in junior biddy with Lenny as well.
Right.
Lenny Savelnis. And I also played, for the Magicians, for Sam Smith and them.
Right.
In Ansonia we had sponsors.
Right.
So you had like Norwoods was a sponsor. I think there was a couple other ones. But yeah, we had sponsors because that's how they paid for the uniforms and things like that. Yeah. You fast forward to today, sports has taken sponsorship to a whole new level. But
right.
Yeah, I mean, I played on some great teams. Sam Smith taught me a lot about basketball and what it meant to do fundamentals and I was just I was really lucky to be a big guy, growing up. So
and the other thing is too, what is really cool, and I don't know I think it was a mixture of you, Lenny, maybe a couple other people, is you guys used to videotape a lot of those games. Somebody would videotape them, and you guys have a lot of those games saved that you guys have kind of like converted to DVD, and I think that's really cool as well because you want to have some type of remembrance from your childhood that you could kind of hold on to, and I think it's really cool that those games are still in existence.
Yeah, I didn't tape them, and Lenny didn't tape. Lenny's father taped some of the varsity games that he played in, and that can be seen on his YouTube channel, which is NVL Basketball Alumni, and he's got a Facebook group for that as well. But no, the Magicians was taped by Luke Richmond's father, and I had given the tape to Lenny in high school, and he didn't give it back to me until about last year. 20-something years later.
Yeah.
And I converted it to DVD for him, and I've converted a lot of things to DVD for him, as well as, the stuff we've been doing for the Ansonia Derby Classic page, Willis Green's games,
right,
and some of the Cable 10 ones that we've been working on. Right,
and you're not one to ever, to you, that was a long time ago, so you don't hold on to stuff like that, you don't look in the past, but is it kind of cool once in a while to just kind of look at yourself when you're 12 years old and remember what that life was like and to watch those games? I mean, because it was, like I said, it was a great time. I mean, do you ever look at them and say, God, this was the most fun I had, playing sports?
Yeah, I mean, it's cool to look back for a little bit,
Right.
Me personally, I think a lot. I more like seeing other people's joy of doing it.
Right.
That's what I like more. So it's much more gratifying to me to see other people's reactions to old tapes and things like that. By the way, the Cable 10 sports games are being aired on from Valley High School football game of the week are being aired on Sundays at 10 a.m. on Cable 10. In the Valley area, that's Naugatuck, Seymour, Bethany, Ansonia Derby, Shelton, Oxford, and that's on Cable 10, and then it's on Frontier U-verse anywhere in Connecticut.
Right.
And you can find out more information about that on the Ansonia Derby Classic Football page on Facebook.
Right, which, I was going to get to next, the Derby Ansonia Football Classic page. It's kind of something you started, I want to say, maybe 2 years ago. Might be a little less than 2 years ago.
Well, we started it.
Right. But we put a bunch of, Jack Hunt, God rest his soul, before he had passed away, he had given me a bunch of old classic games. I'm going as far back as 1961, from like 1961 till about 2003. So, I mean, you're talking like over 40 years of games that he basically put in my hands. And, what we decided to do a couple years ago was kind of make a classic page and kind of put these games, make them available to that page so people could kind of, especially somebody who played in like 1968. There was no VCR back then. You really don't get to watch yourself play, and we've kind of been able to make that happen for them, and I think it's been a really great project that we've taken on.
Yeah, I'd like more people to know about it, and if, you need to reach out to someone to figure out how to do it, don't be afraid to contact us on the Ansonia Derby Classic Football page on Facebook. If you need help, sort of navigating how to get it. The games will not be shown online is the important thing.
Right. Well,
people to understand.
The classic games will be.
The classic,
yes.
The Willis Green games that are not announced from Cable 10
right.
will be online.
Talk about the Cable 10 games a little bit, though. Kind of like let them know what's going on. I know you mentioned it briefly that they're shown every Sunday, but kind of give them an idea of what's been going on with that.
So there's a process to this, and we've had quite a few people interested in what's happening, when can I see my game. And so right now we're finishing up the 1985 season.
Right.
And then for the end of the summer and part of the fall will be the 1986 season for, as many games as we can find. Most of the games are there for the years that we've gone through. But there you might see a game missing or two, so we can't guarantee that every game's going to be there. And then the end of the year is going to maybe part of the new year. I think a week or two into the new year is going to be the 1987 season.
Right.
Yeah. And it's just going to keep going. It's a process of converting games from these old broadcast formats of U-matic tapes, which are these huge tapes the size of like a dictionary.
Right.
And then I have to sit there for 3 hours. Most of them, these games are on 2 or 3 tapes.
Right.
Convert that to DVD, then take that process of DVD and then convert that to a digital format so I can give that to Comcast. And, these games will not be available for sale. They are only available for Comcast. This is copyrighted by Comcast.
Right.
They're not to be given out to anyone. So they're not for sale, and no, you can't buy them or anything like that. You can only watch them on Cable 10 when they're aired. Right.
And the other thing is, though, I mean, one of the things we are going to try to do once they are all shown is we'll try to rerun them again, as time goes on. We don't plan on just showing them and then never showing them again. We like to keep doing it. So, I mean, the games will, unless, something extraordinary happens, the games are going to be shown on Channel 10 every Sunday. Right now I believe they start at 10 o'clock Sunday morning?
Yeah.
Right. So, I mean, I know the time is a little difficult, but, if you're eating breakfast and you followed Valley Sports, gives you something to do before the afternoon comes if you're just like sitting home and not doing anything. So, I mean, it's definitely something that's been a positive, I think.
Football season's coming up. You flip back between that and your NFL Sunday ticket, you'll be good.
Yeah, definitely. And, as fun as it is for a lot of those people to see those games, I mean, there's a lot of work that goes into it. Have you enjoyed it, or, I mean, has it been tough at times, or have you had a lot of fun converting those games?
Yeah, I do it. I do a lot of that for the music business anyway, so
right.
It's just second nature to me,
Yeah, it is very nostalgic. I mean, when you see like Buddy Chernovitz and Eddie Clemens, and you remember like growing up with those guys, and then you see those games again, and you see things too that you kind of forget about sometimes. You forget that not every high school had lights. There were some teams that still were not with lights, and they had to play on Saturday mornings and stuff like that. And you just see like, different things. You see the way people dressed back then when they're sitting in the stands. One of the things I found interesting was, I think I was watching Derby Ansonia, maybe 1985. A lot of people sitting in the stands were a lot of the old-time Ansonia guys that, played for like Boots Jarvis and stuff. And You don't see those same people nowadays. Like it's definitely changed, but back then, I mean, that was the place to be if it was a Saturday morning or Saturday afternoon.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of those guys are gone now too.
Yeah.
But a lot of those guys are people our age or 10 years older than us now. And
Right.
and you don't see a lot of them because the priorities in general in society are not straight.
Why do you think it changed? I mean, it was so popular 30 years ago. I never in a million years thought it would ever be what it is today where, you still get fans, but it's not the same passionate fans that it was 30 years ago. I mean, Ansonia Derby, I mean, that used to be a big-time rivalry. It's not the same rivalry anymore.
Well, I think social media is definitely an issue.
Right.
Concentrating on ourselves, self-promotion. There's a lot of nonsense like that. But then there's also, I think in general, society's priorities are all screwed up nowadays. So when you have something local, like that's cherished, and that is a sense of community, like Valley Sports was, that's something that's like true and natural, and people so much want to be sort of the unnatural thing nowadays online or on a cell phone or something like that.
Right.
So I think that's part of the problem.
Yeah, it's a shame, because, I mean, I definitely think that social media is, prevented a lot of people from, getting into sports. And I think it's always good to get involved in some recreational activity. Even when you're in high school, sports may not be for everybody, but you should do something. Even if you're not good at it, you should definitely give something a try, too.
I know a lot of parents today, they have mandatory outside time for their kids.
Right.
Even if it's just, kicking a kickball around in the yard. They say, no, you can't be on a phone or a computer for the next 4 to 5 hours. You have to be outside, whether that's throwing a football around, throwing a baseball, a basketball. They have to be outside. And that's part of the problem, too, is kids and even adults, they don't go outside. Go on a hike or something. Go outside.
Yeah, something. I didn't want to end this without getting into the basketball page a little bit. You mentioned the MVL basketball page. Kind of go over that because that's really big. I mean, we have a ton of games on the football side, but the basketball side, there are a ton of MVL games going all the way back to, the 70s? Or
Yeah, I think, something like that, the 80s. Part of the early 80s, and there's one game from the 70s, I think. But basically, that's Lenny Savelny's baby, who we talked about earlier, for Ansonia basketball.
And just for anybody who's not sure who Lenny is, Lenny was the star. He was one of the star players for the 1995 Ansonia State basketball team, and he was MVP of the tournament that year. Very good guy, great guy, and he's really put a lot of work into these games.
He's put a ton of work into it, and he's searching for more games. So basically, it's a lot of Waterbury schools. There's some Ansonia games on there. There's a lot of Sacred Heart games. He got a lot of them from N. Generali, who just retired up in Waterbury. And if you have more games, he's looking for him. So if you have games on VHS, or please get them to Lenny, and he'll work on getting them converted for you.
And the reaction's been very positive about that page. I mean, a lot of people have commented on that. A lot of people have liked it, and I think it's getting a lot of buzz.
Lenny's worked very hard. There's not just video. There's not just video files on there. There's pictures, old articles. I mean, Lenny has really dusted off old boxes and begged people to get their archives out. And he spent hours and hours on end just posting photos and articles. And I mean, it is an incredible archive of NVL basketball.
Yeah, and I think that's great because. I say this a lot, and it was something that I really preached at our Hall of Fame dinner is history should never be erased, You have to move on. You have to go forward. But if somebody did something great and put a lot of time into playing football, basketball, running track, whatever the case might be, they deserve to be recognized, and they should never, JFK is always going to be remembered. Joe DiMaggio is always going to be remembered, things of that nature. These people in the Valley should never be forgotten, and they should have some type of legacy that continues on.
Well, that's what Valley Sports is all about, a legacy, right?
Exactly. Well, Sean, I want to thank you for coming on today. It was a lot of fun. I had a lot of fun. We could talk all day. And I wish you a lot of luck with this classic page. I think it's going very smooth. And best of luck to you. And thank you again for coming on.
Thanks, Mike. I appreciate it.
For Sean Morse, Mike Cannici, Valley Sports saying goodbye, everyone. Take care.